little earlier today, the judge reviewed my credentials with the Independent Press Gallery and pronounced that those credentials were sufficient for me to act as a journalist in the UK. That they were similar to UK credentials. The judge told me that I should be a little less spicy when talking about officers of the court, and I told them I would agree. So I sat down in the court next to the other accredited journalists, and that was helpful to me because it was much easier to hear the proceedings. But then when the judge was not in the room, one of the clerks said, "You got to get out of here. You're not allowed to sit in these empty chairs." It's not like it was over full or anything. And I said, "Did the BBC complain again?" And one of the clerks said something like, all the press did. I have trouble believing that, although it is plausible. And I said, "No, I want to hear from the judge. It was the judge who granted me my credentials, and I don't know who you are. And did the judge hear this?" And they said no. Like they admitted that the judge was not behind this. And I said, "Well, I want to hear the judge." And then the security started physically pulling me, and I thought, you know what? I don't need to be ejected from this court over where I'm sitting, but it shows how entrenched the snobbery, the elitism, the discrimination is. You know, I'm from Canada. We don't really have the class system, but you had these prestige journalists on the inside and citizen journalists on the outside. And even when one of the citizen journalists gets credentialed, the mean girls gang up and push you out. And it was so gross that the BBC snitched on the first place that I was saying some pointed things in my tweets. Imagine being a government journalist and you call some government hotline to get your rival. I don't know. I mean, in the past, the BBC actually complained to the police about me. I thought that was very illuminating, and it shows the larger problem. I've reported in British courts for almost 10 years now. I don't know if you know, but Tommy Robinson actually used to work for Rebel News way back in the day. So we had court cases many times, and I've reported from courts, the Old Bailey, the Royal Courts of Justice. I've reported several times from this court, courts in Luton, courts in Peterborough. I probably, when I say 20 times, it's probably about right. And that's just in the UK. I've reported in courts in Canada many times. So this is very unusual. And I think it started when a BBC reporter tattled to the court, which is very snitch-like, very weird for a state broadcaster to also look like a state, I don't know, police service. But I was able to present my credentials from Canada to the judge and show him that I am a credentialed journalist. By the way, I don't really believe in credentials. Journalism is not a profession like medicine or law. It's an activity that anyone can do. But the judge did respect my credentials, and I sat with the other credentialed journalists until the judge left the room, in which time the clerk said, "You got to go." I said, "There's extra seats here." They said, "No, you're not allowed." And I was going to hold my ground and talk to the judge, but then a security guard came and put their hand on me, and I thought, this is going the way of physical force, and I don't need that. So I yielded. But it was an education for me that censorship and general bullshit is still alive here in the UK.